episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
Jury selection is where trials are won or lost, and in Donna Adelson's high-stakes murder trial, the battle over bias, belief, and common sense begins today in Tallahassee.
The global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning journalist, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. This is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime, and it is day one of the murder trial of Donna Sue Adelson versus the state of Florida, and we're coming to you live from Tallahassee, literally arriving here minutes ago, not seconds, but minutes ago, and getting some reports about what happened in court today. I know Tim Jansen was there. We're going to get to that in just a moment, but this is a case that has gripped Florida and Tallahassee, northern Florida in particular, for more than a decade, going past 11 years now in July, since the execution-style murder of FSU law professor Dan Markel back in 2014. This is now the fourth trial connected to Dan Markel's murder. But Donna's case is definitely a bit different. She is the family matriarch. She is accused of being this so-called mastermind of this murder for hire plot, and every move in the courtroom will no doubt be under scrutiny. Here to break it all down, the best guest as usual. We've got famed Tallahassee criminal defense attorney, the letter R and O-U-R, Timothy Jansen, also a former federal prosecutor. Next up, we've got Richard Gabriel, one of the preeminent jury consultants in the entire nation. We'll go through a who's who of who he's done the jury selection process for, but trust me, it is a long list, and Richard comes to us from Los Angeles. And last but certainly not least, Julia Janae, the Court TV truck, is out front of the Leon County Courthouse, and Julia, I understand, will be down here Thursday. She'll be reporting and doing some anchoring for Court TV. And I may be appearing on Court TV tonight at 9 o'clock. Haven't even figured that part of it out yet. But Tim Jansen, you wrote a story for the Tallahassee Democrat. You're kind of a de facto columnist for them. You do quite a bit of work for the Tallahassee Democrat, the paper of record here. And you just wrote an entire story about jury selection. Fill us in. What is the thesis?
Well, I think both parties have two different themes. I think the state wants common sense. They want jurors who's just going to come in neutral, look at the evidence, apply the law, and their common sense. The defense does not want people to apply common sense. The defense has some very serious questions with this so-called double extortion theory. They're going to have to convince a juror and possibly get jurors who are loners, who are skeptical, who are conspiracy theorists, or don't like, because some of their defense with this whole thing about the gangs, right? They gave a prelude in preliminary hearings that Donna's going to talk about the Latin gangs, and that's why she talked in code on the phone. Well, the problem with that is most people with common sense know that Latin gangs or any gangs, they don't specialize in wiretaps. Wiretaps is something that the police do. So that doesn't ring true. And then her trip to the Vietnam, having a third party buy the tickets, a one-way ticket, and not hanging the phone up, all going to lead people with common sense to question that defense strategy.
Richard Gabriel, just let the audience here tuning in, STS Nation, best guest, better community. I know you don't like to drop names, but what are some of the big trials that you've done work on? I believe Phil Spector and some others. Who are they?
So going back a ways, I started with probably the O.J. Simpson case, the Casey Anthony case, Phil Spector, Whitewater, Enron, Heidi Fleiss, and recently I did the ASAP Rocky case here in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow. And obviously, a lot of people will say, well, jury selection is the most critical part of the entire trial, even though, quite frankly, doesn't really feel like the trial, because it's sort of the the action before the action. But in your opinion, and I assume you hold this opinion, why is it so critical?
It's critical because the jurors that you ultimately end up with, it's their own personal life experiences and belief systems which will determine how they interpret the evidence. The evidence is going to be what the evidence is, but how people individually process that evidence and then make decisions on that is important to really understand who those people are. It's also a time where the attorneys are essentially establishing a relationship with the jurors, because if there's fairly good rapport in the jury selection process, that also ensures that jurors will have a better listening for whichever side actually formulates a really good rapport with the jurors. So the two main goals that you're really trying to do in jury selection is, one, get the best quality information that you can use to exercise your cause and peremptory strikes with. And then how do you establish that kind of rapport that allows you to really sell your case to the jury?
Mm. And we're going to ask Richard, if you're the government, who are you looking for? If you're the defense, who are you looking for? Tim kind of mentioned it off the top, but Julia, I know the COE has been on top of this all day, but I was also looking at the Tallahassee Democrat briefly, and Jeff Burlew's, their top reporter on this case. He says that 64 out of roughly 100 plus prospective jurors have now been told to report back on Thursday. Today's Tuesday. I guess, what does that tell you? You're a lawyer as well as a really great reporter and sometimes anchor at Court TV. But what does it tell you that 64 out of roughly 100 prospective jurors have now been told to come back Thursday?
That tells me that change of venue request that the defense is hoping they could get granted is likely going to be denied, because that's more than half of the people qualified, not just for media exposure and saying they could still be fair and impartial, but they were also asked questions about whether or not they had scheduling conflicts. That's what really gets rid of a lot of people in jury selection, is they either have someone that they're caring for at home, small children or the elderly. There's a limitation sometimes with the English language. I mean, there are a lot of things that knock you out in that qualification round that they're going through right now. And if 60% of them pass through on the first day, they're not going to have any trouble picking a jury here. The judge only wants 100 in total, so we only need 40% or less tomorrow in order to keep things moving along. So it looks like everything is moving as smooth as desired by everyone, probably except for Donna Adelson's team. And our Court TV cameras were already being set up in the room where the trial is going to be. But people do get frustrated when they can't see jury selection. So I am curious as to how much we're going to hear on Thursday. Last time we were able to hear questions and answers. We can't show the jurors' faces, of course, but we were able to hear some of the things that the prosecutors were asking them, and that team that was brought in last time around for Charlie's trial to handle voir dire, I don't think that's happening. Tim can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that Donna's new team employed outside counsel for jury selection.
I don't,
Tim, as far as we know, right?
No,
right, Tim?
So. I don't believe so.
And
Because
by
you
the
lose
way,
the rapport, like Robert said, that's one of the most important things, is to ingratiate and build rapport with that jury. Last trial, they had a juror consultant come in and pick the jury, and then his whole team packed up and left, and the jury never saw him again. And Dan never had a chance to even get to know the jury, and they never got the chance to get to know him.
Yeah. By the way, STS Nation, Richard and Julia both in high demand, as is Tim, but Tim is here in Tallahassee. Richard and Julia are going to have to jump in about half hour to 40 minutes, and then Tim and I are going to take questions on the back end. So if I go a little heavy with Richard and Julia on the front end, don't yell at me that I'm not asking Tim as much. But Richard, to you, there have been multiple requests in this particular case with Donna Adelson for a change of venue. There's also been a request to recuse the judge and get a new judge in there. And the judge said, see you later. See you wouldn't want to be. It's not happening. But how common or uncommon is it for a change of venue in your experience to be granted? You just heard 64 jurors, prospective jurors, are being asked to come back already.
It's extremely rare for change of venue to be granted. I mean, it's an incredibly high standard that has to be used. I mean, for the most part, a judge has to say, I basically can't seat a jury of 12 in this venue. And obviously, with the vast population that Tallahassee has, he's going to be able to find that. Judges also don't like to change venue because it's inconvenient. They have to move everybody in here. In Casey Anthony, interestingly, we moved for a change of venue. I was working with Casey's team. And because of the saturation of media, the prosecution actually agreed to the change of venue. And we ended up having to go to Tampa to pick the jury and then import them to Orlando to actually hear the trial. So Florida is one of those few places where they do that interesting thing where they import jurors from another jurisdiction when they do change a venue. And I've heard Florida does more change of venue than some other districts, but it's extremely rare for a lot of reasons. And judges usually don't like to do it despite vast population. And these days also with social media and stuff, it's difficult to argue that this specific community is tainted because the media basically kind of splashes over to a lot of other cities and districts in the state as well.
Yeah, and Richard, I just want to also add that when I got to the hotel, I was admittedly in a scramble to get set up here, but the two women and one man working the front desk would be typical jurors. You know, they've got respectable jobs in their 20s and 30s. I asked them their age. And I asked them, have you ever heard of either Dan Markel or the Adelsons? All three said they had no idea what I was talking about. Not a single clue. And that's in Tallahassee with a population of 200. So I did my own litmus test. Does that surprise you? Because in the true crime community, we're talking about it all the time. And people think Tallahassee is a very small town. These people had absolutely no idea what I was talking about.
It's not that unusual. And it's funny because we get caught up in this either in the media or when we're in cases and we think everybody knows about it because that's our perspective. But in truth, a lot of people don't pay attention to the news. I was surprised when I was doing the Phil Spector case. I thought, man, this has been in the news for a couple of years now. Everybody's going to know who Phil Spector is. And literally half of our jury pool had no idea who he was and stuff. So it is sometimes surprising for those of us who work in these trials that as many people just aren't paying that much close attention to it.
Richard, does that mean we have no lives or they have no lives? Those people. Which is it?
I like to think they have no lives, but
okay.
But I think
I
feel
it's
better
a little
now.
different lives.
Yeah,
Different
yeah.
lives.
So when I go to
Thank you.
when I go to the front desk, I'm going to tell them that you said that. But
No,
Julia,
no.
one more. We are going to be going gavel to gavel here. The COE picked up the slack while I was driving today with Steve Cohen. But we're going to be airing the trial, including portions of jury selection that we're allowed to. We're going to go again gavel to gavel, and then do. I'll be giving you lunch live updates, hopefully beginning tomorrow, and then nighttime recap shows. But Julia, I mean, you're an attorney also. So how does the court balance, or does the court need to balance the need for jurors who know something about the case versus complete impartiality? In other words, does the state want someone to have, or even the defense, do they want someone to have some knowledge of the case or none at all? What do you think?
I'm sure the state wants someone who knows a little bit about the case, but they're not going to say that inside of the courtroom during jury selection. They will have another reason for wanting to keep someone if there's a contention about how much they know. I wouldn't say that the judge has a preference for people who know a little bit or don't. It really just falls to whether the court believes that they can be fair and impartial. And I do think, probably unfortunately for the defense, that the judge often leans toward seating someone versus getting rid of them. I mean, sat through some jury selections where it involved a child who was killed. It was really gruesome. And no one wanted to sit on this jury. Everyone said, because I have a child, because I have a grandchild, I can't sit through this. And the judge essentially challenged them and said, are you saying you can't follow the Constitution? Are you saying that you wouldn't be able to follow my rules that I give you and serve? And he said it in a way where no one could say no. Everyone said, well, yes, of course, if you give me an instruction, I would try to follow it. And essentially everyone became then a potential juror, even though so many people said that they couldn't. So it depends on the judge. I expect Judge Stephen Everett is going to be very measured in the way that he is handling the challenges. But right now they're doing this in a very interesting way. You don't often see this where you have the individual first and they go home for a day and then come back in a day. But because this is such a high profile trial, we are seeing this here. I mean, this is almost the likes of what we saw in the Diddy trial in New York. As huge as that was, you had people having to come back at a later time because we at least want to get so many that can be qualified before we move on and just see if the media coverage really does make it where we can't seat a jury. But to your point earlier, it's almost disheartening being someone in journalism and in the news, how many people say, no, I don't ever watch the news. I don't follow it. I haven't even heard of it. And this is unfortunately a case that's been going on 11 years now. So it's just not top of mind for a lot of people, especially people who may be newer to the Tallahassee area.
Yeah. By the way, the COE shortchanging me here, not to nitpick. 7.5 is actually 8.5 hours. It is the never-ending drive from Miami to Tallahassee. It was an hour up to Steve Cohen, and then you get onto the Big Bend, and then it's the final stretch. And Tim Jansen. Not only did I go to the Busy Bee today,
did you meet the owner?
I met the owner. I'm going to post photos on Instagram, and she gave me a gift basket. I love that place. I love her. I'm going to be posting photos on Instagram at Surviving the Survivor. The COE has cut some sound on tape about prospective jurors. COE, let's play that. And I think this might be coming from Judge Stephen Everett, I believe.
However, I understand for some of you, service in this matter may not be possible under the circumstances. To give you a little more information about what this will involve, you will not be sequestered during this trial. What that means is you will be able to go home as you normally would and return the next day. For the most part, we will work a regular business day, but on occasion, it may become necessary for us to work a little bit longer based on the witness schedule. I will do my best to adhere to a regular schedule each day. So please give some thought to whether any of you may have a major problem, including a physical issue that would prevent you from giving this case your full attention for the time period in which we are discussing. Please be patient with us. We will be working as efficiently as we possibly can. The bailiffs, clerks, and court administration will be assisting in the courtroom. Please follow the bailiff's or clerk's instructions. Do not discuss this case while you're waiting here or anywhere else until you've actually been excused. Do not read or listen to any media accounts on your phone or anywhere else until you've been excused. Also, you are not to speak to each other while you are waiting to be examined by the court and the attorneys. You may read your phones. There are some magazines here available, provided as reading material, but ultimately you are not to speak to your fellow prospective jurors. Again, you are not to seek out any information about this case, but you may silently either read your phones, read the reading material that has been provided, or even if you want to, get some shut-eye, don't start snoring, but you're not to speak to each other.
All the jurors under 30 just said, "What is a magazine?" We'll explain that another time. But Richard, Gabriel, to you, I mean, how important is it? I mean, this judge is kind of universally loved. I'm actually excited to see him in court tomorrow. He has such a presence, but he also has such a command of the courtroom. And how important is that during the jury selection process to set that tone?
It's very important. I mean, the jurors are going to be looking to him for instruction. And also there is research to show that jurors are influenced by judges and by how they perceive their preferences or whether they lean one way or the other. The research does show that. So a judge has to be very circumspect in how they hold themselves, but also if they're friendly, if they're affable, it can set the tone, makes it easier for the jurors to be relaxed in terms of giving information to the jurors. If the judge sets a more formal tone, it can tend to create that sort of formal tone in the courtroom too, which can impact also how much jurors share in their information. So the judge is the leader in the courtroom, and the jurors look to him in terms of their expectations of the process, how clear they are, but also what's basically the mood that's being set by the judge.
Yeah. And Julia, I mean, to you, and you've watched Judge Stephen Everett. I mean, the guy's a class act, but how or when will Judge Everett rule on the change of venue? I mean, he did say we'd have to get to the voir dire process. If you said it, Tim has said it. You just heard Richard say it, that it's next to nil in terms of a chance of happening, especially with 64 prospective jurors already being asked to come back Thursday. But if it were to happen, or if he is to address it, when do you think we'd hear about it?
It would be before opening statements. It would be once the jury is seated. I mean, it'll be functionally denied once the jury is sworn in, but I'm sure there'll be something on the record if the defense wants to raise it. I can't see a situation, but she's got a sharp defense team. I'm curious if they're going to still try and fight venue, even if they do come to a finality of the 12 jurors plus alternates. Perhaps they'll say all of these jurors still knew something about the case and they still claim that these are influenced by the publicity that they've seen. Certainly there has been a lot of publicity in this case. I mean, that is not nothing. And we know could come out on an appeal if they, if there's a conviction in this case, they would bring it up on appeal. So it's certainly something the judge is going to want to make sure is put to bed and is handled on the record before we move into opening statements, which sounds like, based on what our producer that's there in the courtroom said, they're going to move to pretty quickly. I thought they were going to wait until after jury selection happened and wait a day for openings. But she learned that it's possible if they get sworn in by noon, they'll come back after the lunch break with openings.
You're talking Joel, on Thursday?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Richard. Go ahead.
I wanted to mention on the typically, I would expect actually they would renew a motion for change of venue. It's if not just to maintain the record in the case. And they're going to say, look, we questioned all those jurors, even though people said they could be fair and impartial. There's still a lot of people know about it. We believe that creates a presumptive bias on their part. And just to maintain the record, I don't think they're going to probably hold out a lot of hope that it will be granted, but it's always an appellate issue that can be maintained.
Yeah. That's interesting. So we'll see if they bring it back on the record. But Julia, again, just to underscore what you're saying, so your producers are telling you possibly Thursday afternoon, they would go straight from picking the jury into openings.
Correct. If they are able to seat that jury by noon, which it sounds like once they bring back the 64 plus whoever they get tomorrow, that they will be asking a lot of questions on the top end of the morning, but then it should go pretty quickly once the peremptories are able to be used. I mean, it seems like a very large pool to me to have as your final when we're only looking for 12, but I'm very curious to see how this plays out. I don't remember it playing out exactly this way in Charlie's trial 2 years ago.
It's, I don't have good recall of things like that, but I feel like Charlie's trial moved at a very quick pace and they didn't wait till the next day. Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to make the prediction right now that this trial goes quickly. Quicker. That people are saying it's going to go substantially longer than Charlie's. I don't know that it will. I'm going to say somewhere between 8 and 10 days. I say begins this week with openings, goes all next week, and a day or two into the following week, and then we get a verdict. That's my call. Tim Jansen, am I crazy for saying that?
Well, I think a little, not crazy, but it's a guess, right? You got two experienced lawyers that are divvying up the work. I expect cross-examination to be much more thorough than it was with Dan. And they indicated they're going to call, they say 2 to 4 days on their own side. Cut that in half, because usually what the defense says, it's usually half of what they say. So I think it's going to be a 10-day trial. They could pick Julia's right. If they get to Thursday morning and they've got 100 jurors and all the cause challenges are done, now it's peremptory. They could basically get a juror picked in like 3 hours and then take a lunch break and start openings like at 1:30. And the judge has given them like a half hour to 45 minutes. So they could do the openings on Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, and I can tell you, Judge Everett is not a guy. He does not like to waste time. He likes to keep things moving at a very fast clip. Richard, to you from SP 74, why would Judge Everett want 100 in the final pool when each side can only strike 10?
He doesn't really need 100. I mean, we talk about the magic number. The magic number is you've got 20 plus the 12 that you can be seated, plus the alternates, and plus strikes for the alternates. So, you're looking probably in the range of about 40 jurors or something. He's going to be safe. There's going to be additional jurors that come in and go, oh my God, I've all of a sudden have an emergency, or I've got kids that I didn't realize have vacation things. So there's last minute cancellations for hardship that tend to pop up. Sometimes there's last minute cause challenges as people, because both sides are probably doing their own social media searches on the jurors. So despite what they say in court, sometimes someone will say, hey, this person said they didn't know anything about the case. And all of a sudden I found the social media post, which said, I think this woman is guilty and stuff. So he doesn't need technically 100 people, but he's trying to be safe about this. And, he's probably going to be safe. And there's going to be some renewed motions on different things. So I just think he doesn't need 100, but he's obviously being safe about it, and he's going to have plenty.
Yeah. Tim Jansen, I mean, you've been at the forefront of several very high profile Tallahassee criminal trials. What's the difference between this and just, a typical, not that there's any typical murder trial or a typical criminal trial? How are the stakes different here with something as high profile as Dan Markel and the Adelsons?
This is about as high profile case as we've had in the last 30 years that I've been here. I've had public corruption trials that were big locally, but this is nationally. Court TV is here. Dateline's coming, 2020. Everybody's coming. And this is the fourth trial now. So people are really getting into this. They really want to see what the evidence is against Donna. Everybody wants to see Wendy testify against her mother. And then ultimately, of course, everybody wants to see what's going to happen to Wendy after this trial. So there are a lot of people watching this trial, and this is a high stakes trial for both the prosecution and for the defense.
From Rachel D., our friend, the social worker on the West Coast, to Julia, for the people who want to get out of jury duty for an excuse that is denied, does the court really want those people serving on a jury anyway? There's going to be people who say, I can't do it. My cat's got a vet appointment, whatever. Are those the type of people that they double down on in your experience, Julia, covering so many of these trials and being an attorney? Or did they just say, okay, get out of here?
I think they balance it. We don't want to send the message to people that you can come in with an excuse and you go home. I think that the courts don't want people to go back to their friends and say, oh, you just have to tell them about your cat and you'll never have to serve jury duty. So a lot of times I will see judges press them. Hey, isn't there someone you can find to keep your cat? We'll give you a moment to go and call someone and see if you can figure that out. And they may keep them through to the second round. But then during that second round, if something else comes up, let's say they've also seen a headline or there's some issue where they're battling it out, I see them lean towards striking them for cause if they have multiple issues versus this one blanket excuse. So I wouldn't say that you just can get out of it. And I don't know that the judge doesn't want someone on the case who doesn't want to be there, because sometimes those can be your most impartial jurors. Someone who really wants to be on the case and is very interested in it and happy to do whatever is necessary to be on. Those you have to question as well. So I think it's a balance for sure.
Yeah. And Tim, this is an interesting question here from
Great
Catherine.
point,
yeah.
Because there are jurors, there are people in that jury pool that want to sit on this jury.
Oh yeah.
and they're going to
Yeah.
try all they can to give the right answers. I always want to pick the juror who doesn't want to be there, because then I know that they don't have any mixed motive, a secret motive. They want to get out. That's the person I want, because they normally have a normal life too. And
Yeah.
that's the best jurors.
That's
Mhm.
interesting. Tim, this comment is not really jury selection related, but you think the defense is going to try to prove, which obviously there's no there's no burden on the defense, but to prove she's not guilty instead of sitting back and making the prosecution prove it. I mean, the theory here, or the idea going into it, is that likely that Donna had no idea what was going on. So are they going to try to take that extra step to say, not only did she not have any idea what's going on, but she was not, she's not guilty here.
I think Donna is going to try to prove she's not guilty, and try to prove her son is not guilty in this trial also. And she's going to take the stand, and she's going to declare that. And she's going to have these answers, and she'll be subject to some brutal cross-examination.
This is interesting. Some nobody saying this is bigger than Charlie's trial. I think it's arguable that this is. I think that there might be a bigger media presence. COE, if you have the next piece of sound from Judge Everett, let's I think this has to do with questions for the jurors. Questions for the jurors.
These are the basic questions that you will be asked, or some variation thereof. What do you know about this case? What sources have you obtained this knowledge from? Based on what you know, do you have an opinion about Mrs. Adelson's guilt or innocence? Can you set aside your present knowledge, disregard it, and render a verdict solely on the evidence presented in the courtroom? Can you be a fair and impartial juror? Do you have any reason that you cannot serve on the jury for potentially up to 3 weeks? It will save us all a lot of time if you think about these questions and be prepared to give us a prompt answer when you are called back.
There you go. I mean, Richard, these seem very SOP. Anything out of these that jump out at you is pretty much, standard here.
No, I mean, these are, standard hardship questions that you get in every trial. Can you sit for this length of time? The big issue really is the pretrial publicity in these cases. And it's challenging to really find out, because everybody knows about the case. Normally we have to talk about fairness and impartiality and say, is there any reason you can't be fair and impartial? Fairness and impartiality are actually two separate concepts. A lot of people can be fair, but when they've heard a tremendous amount and have formed opinions about it, sometimes that can affect their, obviously, ability to be impartial. One of the jurors today said, yeah, I've heard about this case and I think she's guilty, but I can be fair. Judge, let that person sit. I think that's kind of crazy, because if you've already made your mind, psychologically, confirmation bias says you're only going to look for evidence to basically support what you already believe. It's a psychological principle. We've got all these cognitive biases that we use. So finding out, number one, what they've seen, how they've seen, what opinions they've formed about what they've seen, what they've expressed, is really important. And let's face it, even though we use this concept in court about how people can set aside a bias, there is no such thing. That is a false concept. People cannot set aside strong opinions or strong experiences that they've had in their lives. They may think they can. They may want to try to be fair, but they're always going to be affected by those. The question is, how self-reflective are they? How much do they know they're being influenced by it? We know in the Casey Anthony case that I worked on, a lot of people thought she was guilty, yet those jurors, when they got back, they really took their job seriously. They were self-reflective, and they came back with an acquittal on a lot of those charges. So it's challenging. And to do this, you really have to take a look at the person and their ability to be self-reflective, to understand the strength of their opinions and their beliefs and their experiences, to really evaluate whether that person truly can be fair and impartial.
Yeah. I'm just curious, Richard, since you brought up Casey Anthony. I mean, that is a trial that had a lot of people very upset in terms of sort of disdain from the public. Is that the one that you got the most heat from, or have there been others?
Yeah, I mean, if you call it.
I mean,
I mean,
you
I got death threats.
you did your job very well. You got death threats on that.
Yeah, we got death threats on that. And the truth is, I think that's one of the challenges even in jury selection is how whether jurors are going to be able to put together a unpopular verdict, because a lot of people think Donna is guilty. Coming back with an acquittal on charges like that could upset a lot of people. So we ask questions in jury selection sometimes about, if you were to come back with an unpopular verdict, how do you think that would affect your family and coworkers? Because sometimes people are greatly influenced by that, and they think about that in deliberations.
Yeah, that is truly fascinating. Julia, to you, the COE just put this up, and then I'm going to have to have both Richard and Julia give a final thought, because I've got to let them out of here. Otherwise, I'm going to get yelled at. But the COE said that an FSU student was part of the prospective juror pool today, and said he was at FSU as a student when Dan Markel was murdered, and he was let go. Any surprise there at all?
No surprise. And that's a great thing to point out in terms of the type of jurors who you just don't want sitting on your jury. Unfortunately, they're going to have an emotional reaction to what happened. And that's why I say, new people who may be new to Tallahassee, they get a new bit of population every time you have a graduating class there at FSU. So you may have several groups of people who are newer to Tallahassee, but the ones who were there 10, 11 years ago when this happened, I mean, this is going to impact them in a different way. I even remember from Charlie's trial, a lot of the jurors were wearing their FSU apparel every day. That's not going to be uncommon, but it was something that the defense didn't really like. We heard Donna complaining about it in the recorded calls about, that feeling very prejudicial, but you can't get around the FSU element in Tallahassee. And so
it's football
that's an
season
interesting way. And they may not know about this trial starting, Joel, but they know about the football game that's happening on the 28th or 29th.
Yeah,
going
trust
to be
me.
huge. So
Trust me, I've heard plenty about it. So, Julia, final question for you. If you're Georgia Kappelman, who are you looking for on this jury? Who do you want on this jury? And your final thoughts?
You want someone who is family oriented. I think you want someone who could not imagine a family member doing this. You may want people who are, teachers, nurses, just people who are by trade seem to be very caring about people, because they're going to have to really look at Donna Adelson and feel no kind of remorse for her for what she was going through in a custody battle. You don't really want someone who maybe in their past has these really bitter complications with family members, because if they do have that, they will perhaps overlook some of the things that she said about Dan. And they're hanging their hat on those things, those comments that she made about him, the back and forth in the emails, the telling Wendy, this is how you have to act. He better wish he had never messed with the Adelson family. If you're the defense attorney, you want someone who has been through those kind of battles and can relate and know that there's nothing murderous about them.
Well said. Richard, we always appreciate your time. Before I let you go, if you're working for the defense here, which you often do, who is your ideal juror on this case, and your final thoughts?
Well, we always look on the defense side, especially in these pretrial publicity cases. People, number one, mistrust the reports they get in the media. I think also you're always looking for skeptics. You're looking for jurors who are just going to want to do it. Sometimes we even look for engineers or folks who are going to scrutinize everything. We're looking for those high reasonable doubt jurors, people who want to examine every little thing, have a very high standard for beyond a reasonable doubt there, and are going to want to look at, is there a political motivation? So I think sometimes the conspiracy theorists can always also be good defense jurors in a case like this. You're looking for loners, because let's face it, sometimes the defense is only looking to hang the jury as opposed to an outright acquittal. So I think, sometimes they're just looking for somebody who's what I would call a polar responder, somebody who's going to be the outlier in the jury room. It's going to cause dissent and actually is going to break this jury apart. So that's a personality mix. When you're on the prosecution side, you're looking for unanimity. So you're looking for jurors who really can cooperate and get along and work toward a verdict. But, I take a look at it and I say sometimes I'm looking for a high conflict jury when I'm on the defense side, and I'm looking for a high cooperation jury when I'm on the prosecution side.
That's a good way to say it. Final question for you, Richard. Someone said, what about a divorcee, especially a female, a woman who is divorced? I assume that benefits the defense, but a lot of times I'm wrong. What do you think?
Mixed bag. I mean, sometimes people go, hey, I've been in this. The severity of the breakup, of the divorce proceedings, and of the custody battles is really this is very severe. There are a lot of people who have gone through that and say, I'm not going to kill anybody. I'm not going to try and go that far. So maybe harsher on her. That's one of what we call a similarity principle, which is sometimes you think, oh, that person might be more like Donna. So I might want that person on the jury, but that person also could be more critical of her, saying, I see myself in her shoes, and I would never have spoken about Dan Markel like that, or never would have been involved in these kinds of people there. So it's a kind of a mixed bag when you're dealing with divorcees or people who have been through a similar situation to what the Markels had been through and the Adelsons.
Richard Gabriel, one of the best in the business when it comes to being a jury consultant. Thank you for joining us from LA. Julia Janae, one of the best in the business when it comes to being a court TV anchor, reporter, and an attorney. So thank you both. Julia, when do you get down here? When am I going to get to see you?
Tomorrow evening, I will be there. I'll be anchoring our show 1 to 3 from here on until the verdict. So that starts on Thursday, and can't wait to see everyone.
I'll see you at court. All right. Thank you guys for being here. Tim, stick around for a minute. Thank you, Richard and Julia. So Tim, they snapped this photo of, well, first of all, let's start here. This is Donna today. Just curious. We've been talking about this for a while. She's in front of the jurors now, and she's got a little flashier looking glasses than normal.
Yeah.
Hair pulled back. I think pulled back. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Blue Oxford, black jacket here. She's got it pulled back with a little scrunchie there. Is this the look you expected?
I don't know. I thought she'd look more in a dress, grandmotherly, but I don't have a problem with that. I think that's pretty conservative for her dress. She certainly would have never worn that outfit in South Florida. With the glasses and her hair that way, but she's got limitations, right?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm a little, there are limitations. This is actually the first I'm seeing of her right now. A little bit, lunch lady like. I was expecting, if I'm being honest, I think a touch more like sophistication, maybe. Does she give you, I don't know. Did she give you grandmotherly vibes here? Like, I'm not getting, she looks a little hard to me, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And I was expecting
I agree.
Make her look a little more librarian-ish and a little more maternal looking.
I think you're right. And her and her lawyer look a lot alike right now. They look like they're relatives.
But
you think about it now, you listen to the questions that they read to those jurors that went back when they got it down to 64. There still could be a lot of challenges for cause, because once they read the witness list, there might be somebody on that witness list that's very good friends with somebody, and they might get kicked off for cause because they might be their best friend. It might be law enforcement, and the judge might kick them off. So there's a good reason why he wants 110. I think you're going to see some more challenges for cause when you start talking about the witnesses.
And Tim, for us who are not lawyers and don't follow trials the way you do, just explain what that means when could be kicked off for cause.
So, okay, so there's two ways you can kick off somebody for a jury. Challenges for cause, meaning, and it's unlimited. The court basically kicks them off. It doesn't count against each party. It's biased. It can't be fair. They can't be there. They've already formed an opinion that they don't like the government, whatever. And the judge makes a decision. I think it's best to kick them off for cause for both sides. When you get peremptory challenges, you got limited to 10. You got to hold those like gold nuggets, because you kick somebody off and next witness comes up and you're like, oh my God, that's the witness. That's the juror we don't want. We have no more peremptories left. What are we going to do? You're stuck with them. And a lot of times you end up using your peremptories, getting rid of the worst people, and you never really get all the people you want because the government kicks those people off. The defense kicks all the good government people off. So you usually end up with people right in the middle. The main goal is to make sure you have 2 peremptories before you get done, because there's one of those jurors coming up that you can't stand, your client can't stand, and you better have a peremptory.
From April the 1st, not to be confused with April 1st, but April the 1st. Do lawyers ever employ, Tim, body language experts? This is fascinating to me, to determine if potential jurors' behavior belies their words. Cheers from Nova Scotia. By the way, I got a photo and a beautiful note sent to me about someone that was reading my book. And you know where it's a woman. And Tim, she is on an oil rig in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, in Newfoundland,
Wow.
I believe. Literally on an oil rig. And she's I forget the terminology, forgive me, but she's like a professional. She climbs up and down the oil rig. It's got to be one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. And she shared a photo of her on top of this oil rig, basically rappelling down. And she had a copy of the book. It was insane. So
Wow.
shout out to her. And people have amazing jobs. But Donna looks like a part-time cashier at Dollar Tree. I did not read that comment before reading it right now, but I don't disagree. I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say. I just thought there would be a modicum more, Tim, of sophistication here for me, like a little more pronounced that maybe she's not lower middle class but middle upper class, but maybe they don't want to show that, Tim.
Yeah, maybe they don't, and maybe the lawyers, that's their style of dressing. They don't really have a style. And they said this is dressing down. I was surprised. I thought she'd look a little better than she does in her appearance. And the question was, do you ever have a jury consultant look at the jurors' answers? And the answer is yes. If you have the client that has sufficient money, which we did one time, we had a jury consultant. He didn't pick the jury. He didn't address the jury, but he was watching their answers the whole time. He was watching their body movements. And during the breaks, when we were deciding who to cut, he would tell us who he thought was good and bad based on their answers and their body movement. So that is true. They do. We probably should have asked Richard that.
Yeah, Richard would have definitely been the guy to ask that. Lauren S. here, if she acts on the stand the way she did last time in that hearing, when she was really trying to get sympathy with a shaky voice and hands, we've seen her do this, Tim, where she kind of goes over the top melodramatic. We saw it in the transport video. I mean,
Right.
albeit she may have been having a real anxiety panic attack. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But if there's a sense that she's like feigning emotion, is there a point where the judge can jump in?
Sure. The bailiff will watch. He has a bailiff that is sitting right next to him. And that bailiff's job is to look at the witnesses, look at the defendant, look at the lawyers, and anybody in the gallery who is making statements or comments, nodding their heads. They will immediately, and she does not want to be chastised by the judge in front of that jury. So she's better be careful. I think she's not going to like the opening. I think she might make comments in her with her gestures. That looks very familiar to the jury pick that we did when I was a potential juror in Mag Bono's trial. That is looks like the same setup.
Yeah, explain it, Tim. Explain what we're looking at here.
Well, you got the jurors there. Well, you got a potential juror. You got the parties on each side. You got a judge. You got a court reporter, and you got a clerk. the bottom one in the middle, she's the clerk. She's got the jury, and she's going through the names. A juror will be brought in and asked questions by both sides. And then there's a court reporter, obviously, getting the answers down, and there's a paralegal, looks like. And that's all that's in that courtroom. I'm surprised they took that picture. I'm surprised that they allowed him to take the picture, but it doesn't look like a juror is in there right now. Right?
Speaking of, I think this was just to give to the media. I don't see a juror in there right now, but I'm even more surprised.
I see 2 prosecutors, 2 lawyers, Donna, an assistant, a clerk, and a court reporter, and the judge.
No juror in the photo.
They would probably be sitting next to Georgia, next to the judge, if they were.
They're not in there. Yeah, they released this photo to the media, and there is no juror in the photo. Speaking of surprise photos, this was published by the Tallahassee Democrat yesterday. This has got to go down as one of the strangest defendant's husband photos in the history of all of true crime. This is Harvey Adelson. Now, I argued with Carm about this. Carm said he had to be waving to Donna, but I was speaking to some people, and apparently he was waving to the still photographer at the Tallahassee Democrat, almost like a taunt here. Tim Jansen, what do you make of Harvey Adelson in what appears to be a members only jacket, waving with two hands and looking very happy, by the way, on the eve of his wife's murder trial?
Well, I can attest to the members only jacket because I remember having one. People that saw him say looks in better shape than he was last time because he could barely walk last time. It's a weird photo. And I don't know if he's waving to the media, waving to Donna, waving to the court, but it just seems out of the ordinary. He's got to be shell-shocked because at the airport, Donna made it like he couldn't even make it back home from the airport without him. He wanted to go in jail with her. He says, take me with her. So I don't know what's going on in his mind. He's probably about 78 years old, right?
I think he's in his early 80s now. I think he's
early 80s.
And you know what? And he looks okay for his early 80s, but
he does.
Creepy as hell. Yeah. This looks like one of these old men that runs around Miami Beach, and I've seen him trying to pick up younger women. I'm not saying that Harvey's doing that because I think he is still faithfully married, but he's giving off those vibes. But he looks
that members only jacket was so good 50 years ago. Maybe it's going to come back and play, right?
Let me tell you, he just looks a little too happy for me to know that your wife is on trial for murder. But
it doesn't seem appropriate.
No, also to know that those wrists of his could get cuffed at any moment. You just don't know. And this, maybe an even more bizarre photo. This is Harvey in the gallery behind Donna's defense, and just an odd pose there, Tim Jansen. There's a lot of things I could say that I won't say because this is a family show. What do you make of this odd pose of just weird behavior for a guy whose wife's on trial for murder?
Absolutely out of the ordinary. I would not have, you're sitting in there and who knows if this photograph was a 1 minute, second, and he was acting normal the whole time. But so far, his behavior in these 2 photos look totally out of place. That he knows he's going to be photographed. And if the jurors are in the room at this point, it doesn't look good. Not giving a good vibe.
Yeah. COE, don't ever let me wear a members only jacket. I think my father may have had. I don't even think my dad was too cool for that. He never had one, I don't think. But please.
Hey, I had one. Back in the day, in the 80s.
Tim, you're good. You're good looking enough to pull it off. I don't know that I am. Harvey's not giving strategically ordinary.
It didn't work that well in the 80s.
Yeah. So Tim, one of the things with prosecutors and prosecutions is the old Occam's razor, which is basically the simplest thing is the simplest thing.
Right.
So how important, and you always hear that. Steve Cohen will say this, of course. Common sense isn't that common. Steve is the king of phraseology. But how important is it for these prosecutors, Georgia, who's been doing this forever, and Catherine Dugan, to pick jurors who simply have common sense. That is what is important.
I think you saw my article today, and it's going to be in the Democrat front page tomorrow. My whole theme was common sense. If the state puts their evidence on like they can, and they get a juror that has common sense, comes in for their daily, and they apply the law and the facts, there is no way that Donna's going to get an acquittal, because the defense that they're going to propose defies common sense. The facts and her actions defy common sense of an innocent person. And then her travel and her flight defies all common sense. So common sense is not a friend to the defense. And I told you when you asked me earlier what kind of juror, I was happy that Richard said the kind of juror I said defense one is what he said: a loner, a skeptical, a conspiracy. That's what they want. They want disruption. They want someone that's going to sit in that jury and is not going to participate. He's not going to go along. That's what they want. And during the trial, you're going to see they might focus in on that one juror questioning and look at that juror every time they're making a good point so they can get one juror, because they're shooting for a hung jury. They can't honestly think they're going to be shooting for a not guilty.
How many people think that Harvey tries to take a swing at me in the courtroom and actually connects?
Do you think he knows who you are, Joel?
I hope not.
Probably. I'm sure he does.
I hope not. He knows who you are, Tim Jansen, so we'll see. By the way, it's become a running joke now. Steve Cohen asked Jeff Burlew, the reporter for the Tallahassee Democrat, to come on, and Jeff has once again said no. Jeff hates doing TV, and I feel bad for the guy because he has to constantly come up. I was like, Steve, you got to leave him alone. But Steve is relentless. That's why Steve is the best at what he does.
I'll talk to Jeff. I know Jeff pretty well.
By the way, I did lose my voice because of Steve Cohen, who I blame openly, because we had to talk to each other for 8.5 hours, and Steve likes to talk, and Steve likes to call people. We didn't call as many people today as I thought we would. I'm loopy here, so just a couple more quick questions. I may or may not be doing Court TV at 9 o'clock, but we're going to get going in earnest tomorrow, because I'm going to the courthouse and the courtroom tomorrow, and I'll be bringing you live updates on YouTube. I'm not going to be Xing live in that cesspool that is X, but I will be live chatting, I guess, via the YouTube stream. So if you want insight from the courtroom, find the link tomorrow. You can follow us on Twitter at Podcast STS, and Instagram. I'll be posting some Busy Bee photos. Instagram is at Surviving the Survivor. But Tim, just to kind of underscore some of the things we were talking about earlier, how are you pretty good? And are these people, meaning Georgia and Zellman and the others, good at spotting kind of a runaway juror? Like, in other words, if someone is too eager, finding too many reasons they want to be on this jury, you're like, no go.
Well, you know what? The clever jurors, they don't raise their hand. They don't ask anything if they want to get on the juror, right? And they just try to blend in. And that can happen when you got outspoken people or people that are red flags. You could sometime end up with a juror that no one knows. What did that person do for a living again? Who are their parents? Do you know anything about that juror? And next thing you know, she's like juror number 11. And you're like, we didn't ask her anything because no red flag. So a smart and clever juror who wants to get on this jury, they can ask or answer minimal questions, don't raise flags, don't volunteer, and they could end up on this jury.
Interesting question from Abby Crossing, friend of mine, friend of ours, friend of the COE, helps us behind the scenes. Tim, I know we expect Charlie to plead the fifth, but any possibility he's playing along and hiding that card so he could see his mother one last time? Worst is they can make him pay for transport.
He's been subpoenaed by both sides, and he's been transported. There is a possibility that he could testify in this trial. It's to be determined from the information I've been given. Now, if his position is that his testimony at his trial was his defense, he could certainly come in there and give the same testimony he gave in his own trial to help his mother. Now, if Donna's defense is going to be different than Charlie's, then they can call Charlie and they say, hey, wait a minute, wasn't this a conspiracy with your mom and a double conspiracy, and try to have him impeach her. But it looks like she's going to have a modified double extortion theory defense too, by when they indicated that the gang and Latin gang was going to explain why she was talking in codes, right, on the phone after the bump. And you just can't get around that. It's a silly thing, you know, like that case up in South Carolina when he couldn't get around that the kid had the audio on, and when he said he wasn't at the dog kennel. You can't get around that. She can't get around the fact she's talking in code to her son after an FBI alleged gangster comes and extorts her. What can she say that someone with common sense is going to believe? That she thought that the Latin kings were tapping her phones? They might be involved with a lot of different crimes, but I've never heard of them being involved in wiretaps at all.
And not to mention Indochina Sun Travel, the one-way ticket via Dubai to Vietnam. That's going to ultimately sink her. And we just don't know what new evidence there is, but we're going to start to find out. Tim, your final thoughts. Also, just time frame. Do you agree with Julia? It looks like they're moving. I knew this would happen. I knew they'd move quickly. Looks like we're going to get a jury pool. By the way, people are under the, I think, wrong impression that there's nothing happening tomorrow. They're bringing in another pool of jurors, and then those all come back on Thursday to try to seat the jury. So do you think we're going to actually get to openings potentially on Thursday afternoon, Tim Jansen?
They would have to really have a good day tomorrow, because I think Thursday is going to be a little longer than people think. People assume that this first day is going to be the longest. It's not really. They're only asking him, what was it, 8 or 9 questions, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, when the judge read the questions that they're going to be asked, when those defense and prosecution get up there and ask questions, they could have 30 or 40 questions for each juror, right? So that could take a long time. And if they pick a jury, say they don't get it in the morning and they get it in the afternoon, say they get it at 2:00, I don't think the judge is then going to say, okay, we're going to do openings at 3:30 or 4. He's not going to do that. You don't want to do openings in a major trial after a jury's been there for 7-something hours. You want them coming in fresh, start and go. Now, I know Georgia has been told to make sure you have witnesses available to go on Friday. So,
and that's a process, because you got to travel, right? You got, usually the first witnesses are typically law enforcement who are nearby, but if they're retired or whatever. Joel, what's the word? Tim, what's the word on Rob? What do you think? Does Rob Adelson testify here?
Well, I think it's going to depend on Donna's testimony. If she comes in and they start arguing, she's naive. She's an old lady. She doesn't understand anything. She doesn't know anything. Then I think they're going to say, no, Mama's not naive. Mama's not an old demented lady. I think the court will let that in to impeach her.
Yeah.
And how can you say she's old and naive, and at the same time she knows what Latin gang is and how dangerous they are? I mean, you can't have both ways.
Good point. Nikki Cuds here. Thank you for that. I'm going to get me some hot tea. Problem with Florida in August is it's 137 degrees outside and minus 37 degrees with the AC on the inside, which is why I can't shake this voice. And I also, once again, will blame Steve Cohen for my voice again and again. Tim Jansen, thank you for coming on, man. You're a gentleman. Big thanks to Richard Gabriel for coming on earlier, one of the best jury consultants in the country. So good that he helped get Casey Anthony off, which I don't know how I feel about that. I'm sure people aren't happy about that. You heard him say he got death threats, but that is the world of the legal system here in America. And of course, Julia Janae, Court TV anchor and reporter, and you heard her say throughout the duration of this trial. She's going to be anchoring from the courthouse between 1 and 3. And Vinny Politan, he asked to come on Surviving the Survivor to discuss this case. I might be doing a show tonight. I honestly don't know. I won't know till I get off, but we'll get Vinny. We're Steve Cohen is lining up guests as we speak for the upcoming trial. My prediction is this goes shorter than expected, but not that short. So I think we're here obviously through next week and part of the following week. But I think at one point, Judge Everett was talking about into the week of September 5th or 6th. I don't think
that might be a little long. I don't think it's going to go that long.
Yeah, it's not going that long, but long enough, Tim, for you and I to hit an FSU Bama game.
Bama FSU game for sure.
Yeah. Tim, looking forward to see. Are you going to be in court tomorrow, Tim? Yeah.
I got to be in federal court, but I'm going to check with your schedule. See, I probably will go by tomorrow.
Okay, come by and say hello. Anybody else who's in town for the trial, please say hello. I'm excited. Ruth's coming to town. Shelly's coming to town. And I hate to say it publicly, but I'm most excited to see Phil, and Ruth and Shelly will forgive me for that. But Phil and I will be hanging out. Looking forward to seeing them. Love you all. Love you, America. Justice for Dan Markel. And we will see you on the flip side. Thanks again, Tim.